Greetings everyone, welcome to a new episode of Metal Mixing Guide Podcast. Y'all already know what's going on in this bitch today, but before we will go for the shit, I'd wanted to say a few things. Originally it's supposed to be mix model of a voice within album by intervals. It all started from my collaboration with Sar Sadikov. He had an idea to make cover of song called Ephemeral and asked if I can help with the sound and shit. Within next few months we've achieved pretty close results, props to his playing skills and my ability to steal every single tone in the world, so I've thought that it can be good thing for new tutorial. 2 months later, after tons of tests in different environments, it ended up in the way it is. Yes, I know I'm a champion of fucking up the plans, but original model didn't really work outside of cover context and I used to change a lot of things in order to get stable processing model. Basically I choose to give up something that actually works instead of calling it intervals tone and pretending that I nailed it good. So I'd wanted to invite you to Sar's channel and check out his cover. In order to motivate you little more, we will add information about recording chain under his video, I mean guitar model, audio interface, strings and all that stuff. I'll leave link in the description. So without further ado, let me bring you up to speed with the shit. Let's start our journey from them rhythm guitars reamping. As you can see, we have quite a lot of them, but all this stuff is processed almost the same way, so processing itself is not a big deal. Generally speaking, we have two tone models, A and B. What's more important is the actual way I arranged it. Main double is the main riffage, isolated it sounds like this. Pretty much all the time it's followed by second double, where higher notes getting transposed 1 octave lower. And this additional triple pack is almost the same thing, the only difference is that this time I transpose same notes 7 semitones higher. Altogether it forms some form of inverted power chord for melodic parts, while root note remains the same for all the tracks. Let's listen to it all together. As I said, processing of this stuff is almost the same, so let me show you how it's done with main guitars first. First element in chain is guitar processor Revolver 4. This time we used flat fill head with tube screamer in front of it, so at this point we only form basic distortion. Next thing is low pass filtering to cut out unnecessary fuzzy highs. Basically this step is just a preparation for next plugin, Classic Clipper by T-Rex, to get additional compression and saturation. As a result, we kind of rebuild Revolver's distortion by replacing fizzy highs of the amp with Clipper's saturation. Now it sounds much fuller, so the tone evolves from being middle as fuck straight to fat as shit. Next step is cabinet simulation with my custom impulse. For this double we're gonna use Model A. Just as always, you will find all the good stuff in the additional files pack. Same processing is applied to other channel. Same as other packs, we use L95 and R95 panning. Routing to self-titled bus with no processing, we just need it for batch export. Other packs is the same thing in only exception of cab impulse. For them I use tone B. And also little level reduction of double and triple buses. On top of that I use some editing. Basically it's just open 7-string being dropped from 0 to -12 semitones using pitch correction tool together with few cuts on top to get a lot of swag. I also used fade out for very last note to get smoother transition to clean guitar parts. Together with another fade out on top of processed audio we will get pretty transparent transition, but at this point it's all about drive levels. Seems like we're done here, so it's time to print the audio, but before that, be sure to use at least 0.2 seconds value on them convolvers to get transparent results. I use low quality settings for filming purposes. So set up rendering zone and start batch export from main, double and triple buses. Moving on to lead guitars. At this stage we will get background lead from the beginning, glitchy lead from the middle of the song and also additional melodic double played with octaves. Let's start from main lead tone. First two plugins is Revolver and Impulse Loader. This time I use 6505, just because it provides more kind of stable and compressed sounding. Speaking of pedalboard, I use Tube Screamer with different settings adapted for lead tone, plus treble booster in front of it to get additional brightness. Lead guitar impulse inside of convolver. Then I use Valhalla Uber mod to get little wider sounding, some light touch of chorus. Ping pong delay. Then small amount of shimmer reverb. Some equalization. This module is related to production of cover song, so at this point it may seem like useless element, but there was reasons for me to do this and I didn't want to change the sound by evening it out. stereo control with a major. Basically we just make them mids wider. Then this channel goes to lead main bus, which is the keeper of all equalization applied to lead guitar inside of main mixing project. I used to transfer some of the processing to basic templates in order to free some CPU power. First equalizer deals with rainy mid-range and unnecessary low and high parts of spectrum. Second EQ is additional set of polishing. Altogether they allows our lead to take proper place in the mix. Moving on to lead glitch. Before we will get to all that glitchy stuff, we need to bounce basic audio in order to cut it. Sure, it could be done before reamping, but because of great compression of AB I could get very sharp starts. So first part is pre-bounce channel. Here I used same revolver and keyfare settings. Same kind of shimmer, EQ and a major. So I bounced this shit and put processed audio to lead glitch post channel. Cut it using 30-second note intervals and deleted every second part in order to get this kind of swag. Please notice that I adjusted the intro of our lead before the export. It was necessary because reverb needs some time to respond and fill the sound, otherwise we could get dry start. So even though we cut this thing off, our lead gonna be evenly filled with reverb all the time. On top of editing I also used short fades to be safe from clicks. And now it's time to give this channel shit ton of processing. Check this out. First element is light chorus. Then we cut off unnecessary low end popping. Some ping pong delay. Reverb. Light reduction of highs from side. making the mids wider with the major. Final polishing to get rid of unwanted resonances. And limiter in all-around mode to get slight control on peak dynamics. Final part is octave double. It's based on rhythm guitar processing model, so first 3 modules are exact same things. However, this time I used different cabinet impulse. Some delay at the end of the chain, just to make it bigger. Exact same processing on another channel, both have level around -6 decibels, 87% panning off center, routing to octave guitars bus. Same as with main lead, I keep remixing equalization here. First equalizer will make them shits little brighter and cleaner on mids. Second one is final integrational movement. Here's the settings of mixer just in case if I missed anything. Be sure to use higher impulse lengths together with oversampling where it's possible. Set top rendering zone and start batch export from lead glitch post, lead main bus and octave guitars bus. Last set of guitars is them cleans. Check this shit. Let's start from main clean guitar. Basic tone is formed by first 3 elements. First one is flat fill and clean mode. Then I used custom impulse response as a cab sim. And then applied slight compression to fill the sound. In this case I did not do gain matching. So it just gets louder. Compression itself is pretty subtle. Some more compression with H-comp. This time we get bigger gain reduction, but also use it in parallel mode so effect may seem subtle as well. Then I use stereo delay. Right channel is getting 30 milliseconds delay, while left one remains the same as it was. As a result now we have some kind of double-tracked and wider sound. H delay settings are based on factory tape delay preset. The only thing I changed is turned off analog mode in order to get rid of fizz on highs. And Valhalla room for space. Clean lead guitar. First element is Fox head. Custom impulse response. Same kind of tape delay. Notice that this time I left analog mode in its source position. Same kind of compressor. Another delay. This time I use ping pong mode in order to make it wider. And Valhalla room with higher decay and mix values. You don't really need that much. I just didn't want it to be in front of main clean guitar. I also used off-center panning to equalize stereo placing of them shits. This lead model can be also used as warm clean. Just turn off reverb and delays. Maybe adjust incoming level little bit and you're in. Since we're done here, be sure to use higher length values on convolvers, set up rendering zone and do batch export from both channels. Next stop, bass guitar template. We're not gonna get too deep in the way it works because it was already explained in previous videos. Instrument itself is my free library for Kontakt 5. You can learn more about it by following promo video link in the description. Basic setup and automatic patch has been explained in Metal Mixing Guide number 23. I'll leave link with timecode in the description as well. It's the same thing in exception of using automatic 5 instead of automatic 6. Two outs of Kontakt are processed with matching impulses, so we won't get too much difference in performance on different strings. These are custom made for this guide and use 5th string spectrum as a reference. That's why we keep that channel unprocessed. There was also no reason to match the noise. Kontakt channels are routed to Chronos Sum bus, where I have isotope decoder with these settings. This thing will give us smoother performance by evening out some harshness and clicky sounds. However, when activated it can overload my CPU. I only turn it on right before mixdown of audio to be sure that my processor won't reach heat levels of neutron star. Output of this bus is turned off. Instead of that I use 3 different sends to FX channels for real-time parallel processing. Basically we just have multiple outs at the same time, that's really it. Here's how them shit's processed. Now all 3 go to bass bus, just to continue processing of a whole thing. Then this bus is routed to bass master bus, which represents important mixed corrections, same as I did with leads. Main point of this whole thing is to keep resonating frequencies under control. So first multiband compressor is a light touch on dynamics of lows below 227 Hz. Other bands stays inactive. With next EQ we reduce outstanding low frequencies together with dirty zone around 1300 Hz. We also have more or less wide boosts around 1800 Hz to bring up some of them picking sounds. Additional reduction of low end, same zones, so I just used another EQ to make searching of these more comfortable. Second, multiband control of lows. This time we compress very narrow zone between 100 and 169 Hz. Final polishing of spectrum. We're done here, so same as everywhere. Activate oversampling wherever possible, use higher lengths of impulses, turn that decrackler on, set top rendering zone and start export from base master bus. Last set of audio is pack of 3 synths, them shit's gonna play a role of background for clean guitars. Let me demonstrate it over pre-rendered some of both. So first synth is based on Ambibella preset from Contact's factory library. You can find it if go to synth folder, then pad subfolder, should be here. I might change something, so here is the settings I used. Speaking of processing, first element being used is decacler with these settings. It will help us to even out unwanted clicky attack. Then I use CLA2A to squash the dynamics and maybe get some saturation. BX control to swap left and right channels. We'll need it to get proper stereo together with Ambibella low. Then I use Valhalla Shimmer in order to create huge space feeling. And Valhalla Uber mod with warm and warbly on board to make it smoother and darker. and by below is pretty much the same thing. Still, I might change something inside of the sampler. Processing is the same. I only used MIDI transposition to make it 1 octave lower, that's why it's called low. For Sailor I use self-titled factory preset as a basis. You can find it inside of Choir subfolder. Here I used internal panner to solo content of right part of stereo cause I liked it more. Left and right channels are different in this case. Then I used BX control to put that right channel to center by soloing it. Same kind of compression with CLA2A. Not so extreme this time. Slight reduction around 1487 Hz, right on the fucking edge if you know what I mean. Valhalla shimmer with bigger mix value and lesser feedback. Same Uber mod settings for same purposes. Here's the levels I used. So it's time to mix down our stuff. Be sure to turn on them decouplers, then do batch export from 3 synth channels. Time for drums. Starting from this point, all the action will be continued in the same project. So right now we only gonna talk about drums, but all the audio we've prepared earlier as well as master processing will be there too. Let's just pretend that it's not here yet. So just as always I use Superior Drummer 2 in multi-out mode as main drum kit. Avatar library on board. No any internal processing, we're gonna process everything externally. And speaking of routing, I added output markers to them channels outside of samplers so it's easier to understand the routing. There's whole bunch of other stuff such as bleed adjustments, sample levels, envelopes and sample names. Instead of going for all that stuff, I will write it all down in txt file to mention everything. Or you can just use attached preset. There you will also find custom drum map for this drum kit, which can be helpful for drum programming. Now let's go for processing starting from kick. To make it more clear, I will bypass second step of processing together with triggers. This way you can understand how my kick sounded before I started to do mix changes. Basically it's related to cover production stage. First thing is processing on channels. I use tiny amount of delay compensation on internal kick mic. It's gonna slightly change phase correlation between channels. Very subtle thing. Submic. Here I used EQ to get rid of mid-range dirtiness. And then we have SPL Transient Designer to make them hits shorter and little more focused. Now all three channels go to kick bus where the processing puzzle starts. First movement is complex equalization to even out a lot of dirty stuff. I might go top down at some point, so please don't take it all as a consistent build-up. Then I use CLA 76 to get some compression. Isotope 5 exciter provides us with shit ton of tape saturation. This way it will be easier to play with timbral changes later, just because it will be more squashed and stable. Now I can start to form basic dynamics with Transient Designer. Basically we just reduce dirty sustain and focused attack, forming new fundamental frequency with our bass exciter. Then we use multiband compressor to get control on dynamics all over the spectrum and also control amount of sonic pressure of each band. Basically it just makes everything smoother. Then I use NLS channel to slightly move our kick out of center. We also get some saturation, but it's not that extreme. And right after I use complex equalization to polish things up and form proper kick tone. This is what I used for cover production. You can say that it sounds sharp as hell. And it wasn't that obvious at first, but when I started to test old version of this project with different arrangements, I figured out that this sharpness may be a problem in most cases. It's not really about the tone, the problem is that I can clearly hear that it's fake. So I needed to smooth it up somehow. Because of the way it was done, I couldn't really fix it with EQ, so I decided to add some triggers in order to have better basis for post-processing. Channels names pretty much speak for themselves, but the tricky part is internal envelope processing. Decreased attack allows us to stay away from total sum of samples being too punchy, and sustained control means that we won't get unwanted tails. We don't really need them. Same thing goes for other trigger. So now I can control total sum of kicks by changing timbre of triggers. Check this out. Now we have much fuller and richer sound to work with. Superior's kick bus and two triggers face each other on kick's bus. First thing here is gate. This way we can get rid of some sustain from Superior's channels and sort of glue them layers together. So it's all about summing things up. Bleed itself is not an issue in this case, otherwise I could just turn it off in Superior. About 3 decibels of compression with CLA 76, just to glue them shits even more. Then I started to polish it up with equalizer, also added little boost around 3 kHz to bring back some colors. This was probably top-down move, because next equalizer have had devilish amount of bands in the same zone. Little adjustment of fundamental frequency. And then we open portal to the underworld with another EQ. This one forms final tone of our kick and allows it to take proper place in the mix. Not too bright and not too dark. And now this whole thing goes to drums bus. There is also sense to bass and rhythm guitars side chain compressors. And send to ambient side chain compressor from kick bus. Moving on to snare. Processing of this thing goes in a complicated way as well, but unlike the kick, we're gonna play around with room channels as additional layers. So let's start from the top mic. First thing I did was reduction of several resonances on mids. It was top-down movement to fine-tune work of next element, which is CLA 76 in ALL mode, which means that we get high amounts of both compression and saturation. And then we adjust fundamental tone just a bit. Bottom mic. Here I use Transient Designer to get control on sustain of snares. I wanted to keep it tied together with top mic. And then slight control of the timbre. And bullet mic. As you can hear, I only used kick and snare bleed in it, so we add room colors to the shit and still keep it clean from noisy overheads. Here I just dropped one resonating zone. It's not about clean things up just yet, so don't take it as a polishing movement. Things could be sort of random at this point. And mid-mic. Same as previous, this one contains only kick and snare response. It's gonna make our snare wider and give it solid room feeling. We won't need to use reverb this time. Here's how I changed the timbre to keep things in balance. And I also moved it out of center to actually move snare closer to the center. Last element is 1176 mic. This is the main source of bleed and little direct adjustment to the snare sound. So now all the channels face each other on snare bus. First element is complex control of dynamics. Basically it just unites them shits and form proper attacks on each band. Then we use equalizer to clean the spectrum and add some of that low-end pressure. Limiter will help us to slice them peaks and get little more stable dynamics. Final polishing in order to clean things up and integrate it to the mix. Then this bus goes to drums bus. Speaking of Synths, we have same kind of send to rhythm guitar side chain compressor. And also send to parallel compression channel. Here I used extreme settings to get as much compression as possible. This way we will make our snare fuller and mix. This channel is routed to drums bus as well. Toms. Processing of both is pretty much the same in exception of little EQ difference. Let's start from rag toms. First element is pretty transparent EQ shape in order to get cleaner tone. I know some of you all can say that it's still pretty complex, but in my universe anything below 100 bands per one equalizer can be described as transparent. Our bass to bring up some low end. And CLA 76 to get fuller sounding. As I said, floor toms is the same thing, the only difference is low end EQ shape. This time we have wide boost of lows instead of resonance cut. Our bass and CLA remains the same. Now both channels can face each other on Tom's bus. Another compressor in first place, this time it's gonna unite both channels together. NLS for console saturation with small amount of clipping distortion. Then I reduced dirty noise from overheads bleed and changed mid-range content to keep it in balance with other elements of the mix. Pro L for peak level control. Same as others, this bus goes to drums bus. Hi-hat. It's nowhere to be found in current arrangement, so I will use separate MIDI part to demonstrate how it works. First thing I'd wanted to say is that main source of hi-hat will be our room, so direct mic or overheads bleed is just a support for that. First element is tremolo in order to get slight flutter feeling. NLS to heat up the shit with console saturation. And then I filter out unnecessary lows and highs to make it transparent on top of overheads and room bleeds. Output routing to drums bus. Now let's go back to our main arrangement and check out them overheads. So first thing here is basic polishing to get rid of unwanted low end and some other stuff. NLS for same console saturation reasons. Tremolo to get same kind of flutter. Overheads mask impulse. Basically it's just light EQ matching from drums bus. I used it on early stages of mix to get quick fix of old timbers, but there was no point to apply it to kick and snare, so I decided to bring it back to overheads and room. We gonna use 3 different variations of that. It all goes down to matching amount, so there will be little difference. SSL compressor. I used it to compress the cymbals at first, but then I changed them levels of cymbals. As a result, now it reacts to snare peaks. Why not? It still adds some nice feeling to the mix. Final cut of dirty zone around 6 kHz. Output routing to drums bus. And finally the room. So first thing is self-titled impulses for close and far channels. As I already said, total effect is pretty subtle. Mono channel stays unprocessed. All three of them go to ambience bus. Let's peep this out. So first thing here is CLA 76 inches all mode. It's gonna give us some compression together with some sort of broken type of sound. First polishing move. Let me bring up them overheads so you can hear the correlation. Proceed in sidechain mode. As you already know, we feed it with signal from kick bus. This way we get slight reduction of room during kick drum hits, which basically means little more focus for it. Some saturation from NLS. Flutter generator. And final polishing. At the end of the day, this bus goes to drums bus, and so we are. All we have here is NLS bus to sort of lock drums all together by bringing up some saturation and have little reduction of peaks. Output routing to master bus. So now we can finally add our stems to the mix. I didn't do anything with lead guitars, in only exception of master bus routing, basic fading and little level automations like in the spot between main lead and following glitchy part. Clean guitars and synths are routed to master bus as well, same fading stuff for them. And the only processing move here is little EQ on clean lead guitar. Just subtle reduction of problem zone on mids. Bass track is routed to master bus as well. I also did some cuts here to match glitchy effect of rhythm guitars. Other than that, it just gets compressed by kick side chain. Very subtle thing. Now rhythm guitars. All 3 tracks are routed to rhythm guitars bus where we will finish the tone, but before we will go for it, check out what I did with audio. Actually, let me change the color so you can see it. So I did several cuts to mark transitions between different sections of the song. There is like 5 of them. Intro part, evil part, short ass bridge, chorus, and outro. The idea is to have manual level adjustments for each section to control both pressure and tone of guitars. Remember that we've had 2 different tones? So now we can change overall picture just by changing the balance. So I used values around -0.7 decibels for main double track, not counting the outro. It's gonna be different story. Second double have more variations. From default level for intro to -1.7 decibels for evilish part. This allows me to create additional headroom and let triple track dive in without big volume changes. By the way, I used -2 decibels for it. Then I use little boost for bridge, because that's the place where triple track ends, so we need to keep the pressure around same levels. It should not sound like something is gone. And for chorus I drop it even lower to -3 decibels to leave enough space for octave guitars. And now outro part. Rhythm guitars is not important here. All I want is to do smooth transition and bring it down as soon as possible, giving enough space for clean guitars to be heard. Right after this cut a lot of things kicks in. It creates additional pressure, so we can drop one of rhythms. In this case it's -1 decibel for main rhythm guitar. And almost right after this cut we can start fading it out. Notice that it ends far beyond actual ending of guitars. As I already said, I don't want it to be too obvious, so even though it doesn't end on total silence, we still can't hear it because of other instruments in the mix. Plus previous pre-reamping fade already did part of this job. Now all them shits go to summing bus where I have final timbre changes. I'm gonna pull things in chronologically. So first one is this EQ. My first attempt to make this entire thing work. Evening out some zones and making our shit brighter. It sounds little cleaner now, but there is still a lot of stuff to even out, like this whistle. Now it's not so outstanding, but we've created enough space for other mid-range resonances to be heard, which is bad. Before we will go for fixing it, let's add sidechain compressor and center plugin. Center will even out some center of stereo and make overall mix cleaner. It's much easier to hear the bass now, isn't it? Compression itself is kind of the same we've used on bass, something around 1 dB of reduction from snare. There is still some ringiness in the mids. I think you can hear that, especially when it comes to chords of chorus part. So I use another EQ in front of mid-side processor. And very last thing to cut is this resonance. Now let's compare it with source tone. This is it for rhythm. This bus have lowered level and routed to master bus. Very last part of mix adjustments is set of special effects. Unfortunately I won't tell you how it's done, simply because I didn't keep these projects for some reason. All this stuff is custom made for cover song. Basically we just tried to recreate it as close to the original as it was possible, at least for me. Let's listen to what we have. And now all together. So obviously first of them is just reversed toms. It's not related to our drum tone because I took it out of lo-fi intro part simulation. There was hell ton of stuff in order to get sort of original sounding and these toms include all that shit. The only difference is reversed audio. Same goes for reverse noise. I've made it from short piece of white noise pass through reverb. Then I just used a lot of EQ over it in order to copy the sound of the original effect. There was probably something else like Valhalla Uber mod or something like that. Then I just bounced and reversed the shit. Another thing is this rifle shot. All the processing for these channels is additional reverbs, just to keep it on the back side of the mix. I also used little EQ to reduce low-end pressure of toms. On top of it I used Sub-Destroyer by Joey Sturgis tones for subtle bass drop. From 54 to 27 Hz, whole octave difference. Used the advantage of internal saturation so it's not gonna sound like a perfect sine. So 3FX channels are routed to master bus, while Sub-Destroyer is routed to limiter bus because I didn't want my compressors to react to this thing. It could made obvious pumping hole in the mix. Seems like too much of them last things, but there's another last one for sure this time. Uber mod noise track. Here I just used Valhalla Uber mod with warm and warbly preset in a role of noise generator. This thing will fill the sound, make it little crunchy and dirty. We're done with mix, so before we will go for mastering, take a look at them levels and panning settings. Now master processing. First element is EQ for same resonance control purposes, mostly related to guitars. Actually, this EQ was very last thing applied to this project. I just used it in the first position to get stable reduction before compressors. Another EQ, related to earlier stages of production. I use spectrum matching to visualize problem zones by comparing my mix with several others, so it was easier to see the problems and locate them bands properly. Multiband compression. Main target of this thing is snare drum, so this way I pack it deeper in mix. master matching and form of impulse response, related to early stages of production. Is a to proverb for tiny bit of space. Second multiband compressor for same snare reduction purposes. This time I keep second band in parallel mode, so we fill the sound and still have some dynamics in it. Other bands don't get that much of compression, so I use 100% mix amounts on them. Bus compressor with long attack and short release allows us to glue elements of the mix together and have control on overall dynamics. Last equalizer. This one belongs to early version of template, so here I deal with two resonating zones and cut out unnecessary lows from stereo. Now our master goes to limiter bus, where it will phase bass drop and both gonna get final loudness and peak dynamics control. Just as always I use Pro L. All round mode will give us extra bit of gluing. And that's pretty much it. And for those of you who want to get additional files pack, which includes full pack of Chronos patches, Cubase projects which I used in this video, full pack of impulses used in this guide, preset bank for Revolver 4, full pack of Pro Q presets, same pack of templates for Reaper, source DI and MIDI files, presets for SSD4 and Superior Drummer with custom drum map for MIDI programming. You will find all of them shits in my private post on Patreon, which will be available after pledging $1. By doing this you will also get access for rest of my private content and help me keep doing what I do. Link is in the description. So hope you learned thing or two from this guide. See you next time.